I was 32 years old when I saw the car on fire, and I knew immediately that something about it was wrong. Drop your city and local time in the comments. I want to know who's listening tonight. I had been driving southbound on Highway 93 through Nevada for about 2 hours when I saw the orange glow ahead. It was past midnight, maybe 1 in the morning, and the desert stretched black and empty on both sides of the road. No moon that night, just stars, and the narrow tunnel of my headlights cutting through the dark. The fire was about a quarter mile ahead, right off the shoulder, flames licking up from the hood of what looked like a sedan. No other cars around, no flashing lights, no smoke rising the way you'd expect from a real accident. I eased off the gas and let my truck coast forward. I've been driving this route for 6 years. I work for a small freight company out of Reno, hauling auto parts and warehouse supplies down to smaller towns near the Arizona border. It's not glamorous work, but it's steady, and I know the road well enough to notice when something doesn't fit. The fire was too controlled, too even. The flames weren't spreading to the tires or the interior. They just sat there on the hood, bright and steady, like someone had poured accelerant in a perfect circle and lit it. I slowed to about 20 miles an hour and kept my distance. My CB radio was on, but there was nothing but static. No chatter about accidents, no warnings from other drivers, just that low hiss that fills the silence when you're alone out here. I reached for my phone to call 911, but the signal was dead. Not weak, dead. That happens sometimes in this stretch, especially near the old mining roads that branch off into the hills. But the timing felt wrong. As I got closer, I saw the car more clearly. It was a dark blue sedan, maybe 10 years old, parked at an angle with the driver's side door hanging open. The flames were concentrated on the hood, rising about 3 feet into the air. But the paint around the fire wasn't blistered. The metal wasn't blackened. It looked staged. I kept rolling forward, my foot hovering over the brake. That's when I noticed the figure standing on the other side of the car. A man, tall, wearing a dark jacket. He was just standing there with his hands in his pockets, watching the fire. Not moving, not panicking, just standing. My stomach tightened. I've stopped for accidents before. I've pulled over to help drivers with flat tires, called for help when I've seen wreckage on the shoulder. But this didn't feel like help was needed. It felt like a performance. I was about 100 feet away when the man turned his head toward me. Slowly. Too slowly. Like he'd been waiting for me to get close enough. I didn't stop. I kept my speed steady, eyes flicking between the road ahead and my rearview mirror. The man didn't wave, didn't shout. He just stood there, watching my truck pass. As I rolled by, I saw something else that made my hands tighten on the wheel. There was a second car parked further back, hidden in the shadow of a low ridge about 50 yards off the road. No lights on, just a dark shape against the darker desert. I only caught it because my headlights swept across the ridgeline at the right angle. My pulse kicked up. I pressed the accelerator and felt the truck respond, the engine rumbling as I picked up speed. I kept my eyes on the mirror, watching the fire shrink behind me. The man didn't move. He just stood there, small and still in the orange glow. Then the headlights came on. Not from the burning car, from the vehicle hidden behind the ridge. 2 bright beams swung out onto the road and started moving. Fast. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I pushed the pedal down further, my speedometer climbing past 60, then 70. The highway ahead was straight and empty, no curves, no other traffic, just me and the lights gaining in my mirror. I fumbled for my CB radio, switching channels, trying to reach anyone. Nothing but static. I tried my phone again. Still no signal. The headlights were closer now, maybe 200 feet back. Not racing up on me, but not falling back either. Just keeping pace. Close enough to let me know they were there. I scanned the road ahead, looking for turnoffs, anything that might give me an advantage. But this stretch was open desert, no gas stations, no rest stops, just miles of empty asphalt bordered by scrub and sand. My mind was racing. If they wanted to run me off the road, they could try. But I had weight on my side. A fully loaded truck isn't easy to push around. Still, I didn't know what they wanted, and that's what scared me most. The headlights stayed locked on my tail for another 3 miles. Then, without warning, they slowed. I watched in the mirror as the beams fell back, shrinking into the distance. Within seconds, they were gone, swallowed by the dark. I didn't slow down. I kept my speed high, my hands locked on the wheel, my eyes darting between the road and the mirror. My heart was hammering so hard, I could feel it in my throat. It wasn't until I hit the outskirts of a small town called Alamo, about 20 miles south, that I finally exhaled. The first streetlight felt like a lifeline. I pulled into a gas station, parked under the brightest light I could find, and sat there for a full 5 minutes with the engine running. My hands were shaking.
I called the highway patrol once my signal came back, told them what I saw, the burning car, the man, the vehicle that followed me.
They said they'd send someone to check it out, but the tone in the dispatcher's voice told me they'd heard stories like this before. She asked if I got a plate number. I hadn't. She asked if I could describe the man in detail. I couldn't. It was too dark, too far away. She took my information and said someone would follow up. No one ever did. I finished my route the next day and drove back through the same stretch of highway on my return trip. I slowed down near where I'd seen the fire. There was nothing there. No burn marks on the asphalt, no debris, no sign that a car had ever been parked on that shoulder. Maybe they cleaned it up. Maybe I remembered the location wrong. Or maybe it was never really burning at all. I still drive Highway 93. It's part of my regular route, and I can't avoid it without adding hours to my trip. But now, when I see lights ahead on an empty stretch of road, I don't slow down to check. I keep my speed steady and my eyes forward. Because sometimes the people who need help aren't the ones standing by the side of the road. Sometimes they're the ones driving past. The rest stop was empty when I pulled in, and that should have been my first warning. If you've ever felt like you were being watched at a rest stop, leave a comment below. You're not alone. I was 29 years old, driving overnight from Amarillo to Oklahoma City, when I stopped at a rest area just off Interstate 40. It was around 3 in the morning, the kind of hour when the world feels like it's holding its breath. I'd been on the road for 5 hours straight, and my eyes were starting to burn. I needed coffee, needed to stretch my legs, needed 5 minutes away from the hum of the engine and the endless white lines disappearing under my headlights. The rest stop appeared like a small island of light in the middle of the Texas plains. 2 sodium lamps casting yellow circles over the parking lot. A single building with restrooms and vending machines. No other cars. That should have bothered me more than it did. I pulled into a spot near the entrance and killed the engine. The silence that followed felt too heavy. No wind, no insects. Just the ticking of my cooling engine and the faint buzz of the overhead lights. I sat there for a moment, scanning the parking lot. Empty spaces stretched out in neat rows. The building looked clean enough, modern, the kind of rest stop that gets maintained regularly by the state. I grabbed my wallet and stepped out into the cool night air. The temperature had dropped since I'd left Amarillo. I could see my breath in small clouds as I walked toward the building. My footsteps echoed on the pavement, too loud in the stillness. The entrance was open. No doors, just a covered walkway leading to the restrooms on one side and a small alcove with vending machines on the other. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that cold institutional glow. I walked past the restrooms first. The men's room door was propped open slightly. I could see white tile and a row of sinks inside. Everything looked normal, clean, empty. I turned toward the vending machines. There were 3 of them lined up against the back wall. 1 for sodas, 1 for snacks, 1 for coffee. The coffee machine was older, the kind with a coin slot and buttons that looked like they'd been pressed 1,000,000 times. I fed a few dollars into the machine and pressed the button for black coffee. The machine whirred to life, and a paper cup dropped into place. Hot liquid streamed out, filling the cup with that bitter, slightly burnt smell that all rest stop coffee seems to have. I was reaching for the cup when I heard it. A voice, soft, almost conversational, coming from somewhere behind me. "Long night?" I froze. My hand hovered over the coffee cup. I didn't turn around right away. I just stood there, listening, trying to place where the voice had come from. The restrooms? The parking lot? I turned slowly. There was a man standing near the entrance to the alcove. I hadn't heard him walk up, hadn't heard footsteps or a car door closing. He was just there. He was maybe in his 40s, average height, wearing a faded denim jacket and jeans. His hair was dark, slicked back, and his face had that weathered look of someone who spent a lot of time outdoors. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Long drive." He nodded, still smiling. "Where you headed?" "Oklahoma City." "Long way to go." I grabbed my coffee and took a step back, putting more distance between us. Something about him felt off. Not threatening exactly, just wrong, like a picture that's been tilted just enough to make you uncomfortable. "You traveling alone?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. My instinct told me not to. "Just passing through," I said finally. He nodded again, that same empty smile on his face. "Me too." I glanced past him toward the parking lot. Still empty. No new cars, no sign of where he'd come from. "Well," I said, "I should get back on the road." "You should try the snacks," he said, gesturing toward the vending machine behind me. "They're good here." I didn't look at the machine. I kept my eyes on him. "I'm good. Thanks." I started to walk past him, keeping a wide berth, my coffee clutched in one hand. He didn't move, just stood there watching me with that fixed smile. As I passed him, I caught a smell, faint but unmistakable. Gasoline. And something else underneath it. Something sour and organic. I quickened my pace, walking out of the alcove and back toward the parking lot. My truck was right where I'd left it, sitting under the yellow glow of the sodium lamp. I didn't look back. I just walked straight to the driver's side door, opened it, and climbed in. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. I glanced toward the building. The man was standing at the entrance now, just outside the alcove, still watching, still smiling. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the parking spot. As I turned toward the exit, I saw something that made my chest tighten. There was a car parked at the far end of the lot, in the shadows, away from the lights. I hadn't seen it when I pulled in. It was a dark sedan, older model with the hood propped open. Someone was standing beside it. Another man, taller, watching. I didn't wait to see more. I hit the gas and pulled back onto the highway, my tires squealing slightly on the pavement. I kept checking my rearview mirror for the next 10 miles. No headlights followed me. No dark sedan appeared in the distance, just empty road and darkness. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd walked into something I wasn't supposed to see. Or maybe I'd walked away from something that was meant for me. I didn't stop again until I reached Oklahoma City. I drove straight through, even though my eyes were burning and my hands were cramping on the wheel. I didn't care. I just needed to be somewhere with people, somewhere with light and noise and movement. When I finally pulled into a gas station on the outskirts of the city, the sun was starting to rise. I sat in the parking lot for a while, watching the world wake up around me. Cars pulling in for morning coffee, truckers fueling up, normal people doing normal things. I thought about calling the police, telling them about the rest stop, the man, the car in the shadows. But what would I say? That someone talked to me? That I saw a car with the hood up? I didn't have proof of anything, just a feeling, so I didn't call. I just finished my route, turned in my paperwork, and went home. I've driven past that rest stop a dozen times since then, always during the day, always with other cars around. It looks normal in the daylight, clean, safe, the kind of place you'd stop without thinking twice. But I've never stopped there again at night, because I still remember the smell of gasoline and the way that man smiled without ever blinking, and I still wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed just a little bit longer. I was driving through rural Montana when I picked up a hitchhiker, and by the time I realized my mistake, it was already too late to turn back. Comment below if you've ever picked up a stranger on the road. What happened? I was 35 when it happened. I'd been driving solo routes for nearly a decade, and I'd always followed one rule: never pick up hitchhikers. Never. But that night, I broke it. It was late October, and I was hauling a partial load of furniture from Billings to Missoula. The route took me through some of the emptiest stretches of Highway 12, winding through forests and mountains with nothing but darkness pressing in from all sides. The temperature had dropped below freezing. My breath fogged the windows every time I exhaled, and I could see frost forming at the edges of the windshield, despite the heater running full blast. I'd been on the road for about 3 hours when I saw him. He was standing on the shoulder, just outside the reach of my headlights, one arm raised, thumb out. He was wearing a light jacket, no hat, no gloves, just standing there in the cold like it didn't bother him at all. I should have driven past. I knew that. But something made me slow down. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was the fact that I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. Maybe it was just loneliness. I pulled onto the shoulder about 20 feet ahead of him and waited. He walked up to the passenger window, slow and unhurried, and tapped on the glass. I rolled it down halfway. "Where you headed?" I asked. "West," he said. His voice was flat, no inflection. "Anywhere west." He looked younger than I'd expected, maybe late 20s. His face was pale, almost gray in the dim light from the dashboard. His eyes were dark, sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm going to Missoula," I said. "That work?" He nodded. "That works." I unlocked the door and he climbed in. The cold air that came with him seemed to linger even after he'd closed the door. He didn't say anything, just sat there with his hands in his lap, staring straight ahead. I pulled back onto the highway and tried to make conversation. "Cold night to be out here," I said. He didn't respond right away, just kept staring at the road. "Yeah," he said finally. "Car breakdown?" Something like that. I waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't. Just sat there in silence, his breath coming out in slow, shallow clouds. I turned my attention back to the road. The highway was narrow here, twisting through dense forest. No streetlights, no houses, just trees crowding in on both sides, and the occasional reflective marker glinting in my headlights. We drove like that for about 10 minutes. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I kept glancing over at him, trying to read his expression, but his face gave nothing away. Then I noticed something that made my hands tighten on the wheel. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. It's a small thing, I know, but it stood out. Most people buckle up automatically. It's muscle memory. But he just sat there perfectly still, hands folded in his lap. "You should put your seatbelt on," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. He turned his head slowly toward me. His eyes caught the light from the dashboard, and for a second they looked almost reflective, like an animal's. "I don't need it," he said. I didn't know what to say to that, so I let it drop. A few more miles passed. The forest seemed to press closer, the trees leaning over the road like they were trying to block out the sky. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness. and beyond that, there was nothing. Then I smelled it. Wet earth, decay, the kind of smell you get near stagnant water or rotting wood. It was faint at first, but it grew stronger with each passing minute. I cracked my window, hoping fresh air would clear it out, but the cold that rushed in only made it worse. The smell seemed to cling to the inside of the cab, thick and organic. I glanced at my passenger. He was still staring straight ahead, his expression blank. But now I noticed something else. His jacket was damp, not soaked, but wet enough that I could see dark patches spreading across the fabric. And his hair, it was matted down against his head, like he'd been standing in the rain. But it hadn't rained, not tonight, not for days. "You okay?" I asked, my voice sounding smaller than I wanted it to. He didn't answer, just kept staring. I focused on the road, my pulse quickening. I told myself I was overreacting, told myself he was just tired, just cold, just a guy who needed a ride. But my instincts were screaming at me to pull over, to tell him to get out, to do something. Then he spoke. "Do you believe in second chances?" His voice was different now, softer, almost sad. "What?" I said, not sure I'd heard him right. "Second chances," he repeated. "Do you think people get them?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know, maybe." He nodded slowly. I didn't. The temperature in the cab seemed to drop another 10 degrees. I could see my breath now, thick and white in the air. The smell of wet earth was overwhelming. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned to look at me fully for the first time. His face was closer than it should have been, and I could see that his skin wasn't just pale. It was wrong, mottled, like something that had been underwater too long. "I was driving this road," he said quietly. 3 years ago, I missed the turn up ahead, went off the embankment. My heart stopped. "They didn't find me for 2 weeks. I jerked the wheel, pulling onto the shoulders so hard the tires skidded on the loose gravel. The truck came to a stop, and I sat there, my hands locked on the wheel, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I turned to look at the passenger seat. It was empty. No damp jacket, no smell of decay. Just the empty seat and the faint outline of condensation on the window where he'd been sitting. I sat there for a long time, staring at that empty seat, my mind racing, my hands shaking. Then I looked ahead, at the road stretching out before me. About 100 yards up, I saw it. A gap in the guardrail, old, rusted. The metal bent outward like something had crashed through it years ago. I put the truck in gear and drove forward slowly. When I reached the gap, I stopped and looked down. The embankment dropped sharply into darkness, trees and brush growing thick at the bottom. I couldn't see anything down there, but I knew. I got back in the truck and drove the rest of the way to Missoula without stopping. I didn't report it, didn't tell anyone what I'd seen, what I'd felt. Because how do you explain something like that? I looked it up later, found a news article from 3 years back about a man who'd gone missing on Highway 12. His car was found at the bottom of an embankment 2 weeks after he disappeared. He'd been alone, no passengers. His name was listed, his age, his hometown. I never picked up another hitchhiker after that night, and I never drove that stretch of highway after dark again. I was sitting in stopped traffic on a West Virginia mountain pass when I realized the car behind me had been following me for over 200 miles. Drop a comment if you've ever had a car tail you for too long. How did you handle it? I'm 41 years old, and I've been driving commercial routes through the Appalachians for 15 years. I know these roads. I know the patterns of traffic, the behavior of local drivers, the rhythm of the interstate. So when something breaks that rhythm, I notice. It was early November, and I was hauling medical supplies from Charleston, West Virginia, to a distribution center outside Roanoke, Virginia. The route took me along Interstate 64 through the mountains, then south on 77. Standard run. Nothing complicated. I left Charleston just after dawn. The sky was overcast, low clouds clinging to the ridgelines, and a light drizzle misted the windshield. Traffic was moderate, a mix of commuters heading to work and a few other commercial trucks making their morning runs. About 30 miles outside Charleston, I noticed the silver Honda. It wasn't doing anything unusual. Just driving in the right lane, maintaining a steady speed about 3 car lengths behind me. A newer model sedan. Clean. No visible damage or distinguishing features. I didn't think much of it at first. Plenty of cars take the same route for long stretches, but after another 20 miles, it was still there. Same distance, same lane position. I changed lanes to pass a slower truck. The Honda changed lanes a few seconds later. I merged back into the right lane. The Honda followed. I told myself it was coincidence. People drive the same highways. They follow similar patterns. It didn't mean anything, but the feeling in my gut said otherwise. I kept driving, keeping one eye on the road and one on my rearview mirror. The Honda stayed locked in position, never closing the gap, never falling back. Just there. We passed through Beckley. The Honda stayed behind me. We climbed through the mountain passes, the road winding through dense forest and fog. The Honda stayed behind me. We merged onto Interstate 77 heading south. The Honda stayed behind me. By the time I'd been on the road for 2 hours, I was certain this wasn't coincidence. I decided to test it. There was a rest area coming up in about 5 miles. I signaled early and pulled off the highway, watching the mirror to see what the Honda would do. It followed. My chest tightened. I drove into the rest area slowly, scanning the parking lot. A few cars scattered near the building. A couple of semis parked in the truck section. Enough people around that I didn't feel completely isolated, but not crowded either. I pulled into a spot near the building entrance, where I'd have a clear view of the parking lot. I left the engine running and watched. The Honda drove past the entrance, circled the lot once, then parked about 50 feet away, far enough to maintain distance, but close enough to keep me in sight. The driver didn't get out. I sat there for a full 5 minutes, waiting. The Honda didn't move. No one emerged. The windows were tinted just dark enough that I couldn't make out more than a vague silhouette behind the wheel. My phone buzzed, a text from dispatch asking for an ETA update. I typed out a quick response, my eyes never leaving the Honda. After another minute, I decided to get out. If someone was following me, I wanted to see their face, wanted to let them know I'd noticed. I opened the door and stepped out, making my movements slow and deliberate. I walked toward the building entrance, but kept the Honda in my peripheral vision. Still no movement. I went inside, used the restroom, bought a coffee from the vending machine. The whole time, my mind was working through possibilities. Maybe it was just paranoia. Maybe the driver was just tired, taking a break. Maybe I was reading too much into a random pattern. But when I walked back outside, the Honda was still there, engine running, no one visible inside. I got back in my truck and sat there sipping my coffee, watching. The Honda didn't move. After 10 minutes, I put my truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. I watched the mirror as I merged. The Honda waited about 30 seconds, then pulled out and followed. Same distance, same lane position. My hands tightened on the wheel. I tried calling dispatch to report it, but the signal was weak in the mountains. The call dropped twice before I gave up. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? Someone's driving behind me on a public highway? They're not threatening me, not breaking any laws, just driving. I decided to try something else. There was a small town coming up in about 15 miles. I'd driven through it dozens of times. It had a main street, a gas station, and a few side roads that led into residential neighborhoods. When I reached the town, I took the exit. The Honda followed. I drove slowly through the main street, past the gas station, past a small diner with a flickering neon sign. Then I turned onto a side road that led into a quiet neighborhood. The Honda turned behind me. The houses here were older, set back from the road, with tall trees and overgrown yards. No one was outside, no cars moving. Just empty streets and gray skies. I made another turn, then another, winding through the neighborhood in a pattern that made no sense unless you were deliberately following someone. The Honda stayed behind me the entire time. My pulse was hammering now. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't paranoia. I circled back toward the main road and pulled into the gas station. I parked right in front of the entrance, where the security cameras would have a clear view, and got out. The Honda drove past the station, slowed, then pulled into a spot at the far end of the lot. I walked inside and approached the counter. A woman in her 50s looked up from a magazine. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice steady. "There's a car that's been following me, silver Honda. It's parked outside right now. Can you call the police?" She frowned. "Following you, are you sure?" "I'm sure." She looked past me through the window, then picked up the phone and dialed. I stood there, listening to her explain the situation to whoever was on the other end. My eyes stayed locked on the Honda through the glass. After a few minutes, she hung up. "They're sending someone. Should be here in about 10 minutes. I nodded. "Thanks." I bought a bottle of water and stood near the window, watching. The Honda hadn't moved. The engine was still running, exhaust rising in thin wisps into the cold air. 8 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled into the lot. A single officer got out and walked toward the Honda. I watched through the window as he approached the driver's side, tapped on the glass, and spoke to whoever was inside. The conversation lasted maybe a minute. Then the officer stepped back, and the Honda pulled out of the lot and drove away. The officer came inside. "You the one who called?" he asked. "Yeah." The driver said they were just taking a break, said they didn't realize they'd been following you. "They've been behind me for over 200 miles, I said, through multiple lane changes, through a rest stop, through this whole town. He nodded, but his expression didn't change. "I ran the plates, everything checks out. Vehicles registered to someone in Roanoke. No warrants, no priors. So that's it?" I gave them a warning, told them to find a different route. They won't bother you again. I wanted to argue, wanted to explain that this felt like more than just someone taking the same route, but I could see it in his face. He thought I was overreacting. "All right," I said. "Thanks." He left. I stood there for another few minutes, finishing my water, waiting to see if the Honda would come back. It didn't. I got back on the highway and finished the last hour of my drive without incident. No silver Honda in my mirror. No cars following too close. When I reached the distribution center in Roanoke, I filed a report with my company, told them what happened. They noted it in my file but didn't take any formal action. I finished my route and drove home the next day. But 2 weeks later, I was hauling another load through West Virginia. Different route, different time of day. And I saw it again. The silver Honda, parked on the shoulder of a rural stretch of highway. Engine off. Empty. I didn't stop. I just kept driving. But I wrote down the license plate number this time, and when I got home, I looked it up online. The vehicle had been reported abandoned 3 days earlier. The registered owner had filed a missing person report on herself. They never found her. I heard the knocking on my trailer at 2 a.m, parked alone at a truck stop in New Mexico, and I knew I shouldn't open the door. If you've ever heard something strange while sleeping in your cab, leave a comment. I need to know I'm not the only one. I was 38 years old, parked overnight at a truck stop just off Interstate 25 near Las Cruces, when I heard the knocking. 3 deliberate raps against the side of my trailer. Slow, evenly spaced, too purposeful to be an accident. I'd pulled in around midnight after a long haul from Phoenix. I was carrying electronics, nothing valuable enough to draw attention, just standard freight. The truck stop was one I'd used before. Well lit, decent security. The kind of place where you can get a few hours of sleep without worrying too much. I'd parked in the overflow lot, away from the main building. There were maybe a dozen other trucks scattered around, most with their curtains drawn and running lights off. Everyone sleeping or trying to. I'd been dozing for about 2 hours when the knocking woke me. 3 knocks, clear and distinct. I lay there in my sleeper berth, staring at the ceiling, my heart already picking up speed. My first thought was that someone had bumped into the trailer while walking past. But the truck stop wasn't crowded, and it was 2 a.m. I waited, listening. Silence. Just the faint hum of my auxiliary power unit and the distant sound of traffic on the interstate. Nothing else. I told myself I'd imagined it, that I'd been dreaming. I closed my eyes and tried to settle back into sleep. Then I heard it again. 3 knocks. Same rhythm, same location, right behind my head, on the other side of the thin metal wall. I sat up, my pulse hammering in my ears. Someone was outside my trailer, knocking, at 2 a.m. I reached for my phone and checked the screen. No missed calls, no messages, just the blue glow of the lock screen showing 2:17 a.m. I pulled back the curtain slightly and looked out the side window. The parking lot was quiet, a few trucks with their running lights on, nobody walking around, no movement. I couldn't see the side of my own trailer from where I was sitting. The angle was wrong. If someone was standing there, they'd be just out of view. I waited, watching, listening, nothing. Maybe they'd moved on. Maybe it was just some drunk person wandering the lot, confused about which truck was theirs. But then I heard it a third time. 3 knocks. And this time, I heard something else. A voice. Faint, muffled by the metal between us. Open up. 2 words, and barely audible, but unmistakable. My blood ran cold. I sat there frozen, my hand still gripping my phone. Every instinct told me not to respond, not to move, not to let whoever was out there know I was awake. Open up, the voice said again, louder this time. I didn't recognize it, couldn't tell if it was male or female. The tone was flat, no emotion, just a command. I looked at my phone again, thumb hovering over the emergency call button. But I hesitated. What would I say? Someone knocked on my truck? Someone asked me to open the door? The knocking came again. But this time it wasn't 3 slow raps. It was faster, harder. A dozen quick strikes against the trailer wall, like someone pounding with the flat of their hand. Then it stopped. Silence rushed back in, thick and suffocating. I slid off the bunk as quietly as I could and moved toward the front of the cab. My hands were shaking. I kept my phone clutched tight, the screen casting a pale glow in the darkness. I needed to see who was out there, needed to know what I was dealing with. I reached the driver's seat and looked out through the windshield. The parking lot stretched out before me, empty and still. Sodium lights cast yellow pools across the pavement. I scanned the area around my truck, looking for any sign of movement. Nothing. I grabbed my flashlight from the center console and aimed it out the side window, sweeping the beam along the length of the trailer. Empty, no one there. But the knocking had been real. I'd heard it, felt it through the walls. I sat there in the driver's seat, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to start the engine and drive away. Just leave. Find another truck stop. Another parking lot. But another part of me knew that running wouldn't solve anything. If someone was targeting me, they'd already seen my truck, my license plate, my company name printed on the side. I checked the time. 2:23 a.m. Still hours until dawn. I decided to call the truck stop security. I found the number on a sticker inside the windshield and dialed. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. Security. Yeah, I'm parked in the overflow lot. Someone just knocked on my trailer. They're asking me to open up. There was a pause. Did you see who it was? No, they were on the side of the trailer. I couldn't see them from the cab. All right, stay in your truck. I'll send someone to check it out. The line went dead. I sat there, waiting. My eyes darted between the mirrors, scanning for any movement. The minutes crawled by. 5 minutes later, I saw headlights approaching, a small white pickup truck with a yellow light bar on top. Security. The truck pulled up alongside mine, and a man in a dark uniform got out. He had a flashlight and a radio clipped to his belt. He walked around my trailer slowly, shining his light along the sides and underneath. I opened my door and leaned out. See anything? He shook his head. Nothing out here. You sure someone was knocking? I'm sure. He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his expression. All right. Well, there's no one here now. Probably just someone messing around. We've had a few incidents lately. People walking the lots looking for unlocked doors. What kind of incidents? He hesitated. Thefts, mostly. Some vandalism, nothing serious. Nothing serious, I repeated. He shrugged. Just keep your doors locked. You'll be fine. He got back in his truck and drove off. I stood there for a moment, the cold night air biting at my skin. Then I climbed back into the cab and locked the door behind me. I didn't sleep after that. I just sat in the driver's seat, flashlight within reach, watching the mirrors. Around 4 in the morning, I heard it again. 3 knocks, same side of the trailer, same rhythm. I grabbed my flashlight and jumped out of the cab before I could second-guess myself. I ran around to the side of the trailer, beam cutting through the darkness. No one. I swept the light across the pavement, looking for footprints, fresh marks, anything. There was nothing, just empty asphalt and the distant hum of the interstate. But when I aimed the flashlight at the side of the trailer, I saw something that made my stomach drop. 3 marks, scratched into the paint. Fresh, the metal underneath gleaming where the paint had been scraped away. They weren't there before. I was certain of that. I ran my fingers over the scratches. They were deep, deliberate, made by something sharp. I looked around the parking lot again. Still no one. I got back in the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine. I didn't care what time it was. I wasn't staying there. I pulled out of the truck stop and got back on the highway, heading north. I drove for another hour before I felt safe enough to stop again. When I finally parked at another truck stop near Albuquerque, I got out and checked the trailer again. The 3 scratches were still there, thin lines, evenly spaced, running vertically down the metal. I took a photo with my phone and sent it to my dispatcher with a brief explanation. They told me to file a report when I reached my destination. But I never found out who made those marks, or what they wanted. I still drive overnight routes. I still park at truck stops. But now I check the area more carefully before I settle in for the night. And I keep my doors locked. Because sometimes 3 knocks is a warning, and sometimes it's an invitation. I watched the same stretch of road repeat itself 3 times before I accepted that something was very wrong. Comment below if you've ever felt trapped on a highway with no way out. What did you do? I was 43 years old, driving through rural Idaho on Highway 95, when I got stuck in what I can only describe as a loop, the same 10-mile stretch of road over and over, with no explanation and no way to break free. It started just after sunset. I'd left Coeur d'Alene around 6 in the evening, hauling agricultural equipment south toward Boise. The route was straightforward. One main highway cutting through farmland and forest, with only a handful of small towns along the way. The weather was clear. No fog, no rain, just that deep blue twilight that comes right before full dark. I'd been driving for about an hour when I passed a distinctive landmark. An old red barn sitting about 50 yards off the highway, its roof partially collapsed, white paint peeling from the wood siding. There was a faded advertisement painted on the side. Something about feed and grain, the letters barely visible. I noticed it because the barn stood out against the empty fields, a relic from another era, slowly rotting back into the earth. I kept driving. The road ahead was straight and empty, no other cars in either direction, just my headlights cutting through the gathering darkness and the white lines disappearing beneath my wheels. About 10 minutes later, I saw the barn again. The same barn, same collapsed roof, same faded advertisement. I slowed down, frowning. I looked at my odometer. I'd driven nearly 12 miles since I first saw it. There was no way I'd circled back. The road had been straight the entire time. I checked my GPS. It showed me on Highway 95 heading south, exactly where I should be. No detours, no wrong turns. But I'd just passed the same barn twice. I kept driving, my hands tightening on the wheel. Maybe there were two barns, similar structures, easy to confuse in the fading light. But I knew that wasn't right. The details were too specific. The angle of the collapsed roof, the exact wording of the advertisement, the way the white paint curled away from the wood in long strips. It was the same barn. 10 minutes later, I saw it again. This time, I pulled over onto the shoulder and sat there, engine idling, staring at the structure in my side mirror. My heart was pounding. My mouth felt dry. I picked up my phone and checked the GPS again, still showing Highway 95, still showing forward progress, the little blue dot moving steadily south on the map. But the barn was there, behind me, for the third time. I got out of the truck and stood on the shoulder looking back at the road I'd just traveled. It stretched straight into the distance, vanishing into the twilight. No curves, no intersections. Nothing that would explain how I'd ended up in the same place 3 times. The air was cool and still. I could hear crickets in the grass and the faint rustle of wind through the fields. Normal sounds. The world felt normal. Except it wasn't. I got back in the truck and pulled up my logbook. According to my records, I'd been driving for an hour and 20 minutes. My odometer showed I'd covered nearly 40 miles, but I was still here, at the barn. I tried calling dispatch. The phone rang twice, then cut to static. I tried again. Same result. I checked the signal strength. 2 bars. Not great, but enough for a call. I tried a third time. This time, the call connected. Dispatch, this is Unit 742. Static crackled on the other end. Then a voice, faint and distorted. Unit 7. Location. I'm on Highway 95, about an hour south of Coeur d'Alene. But something's wrong. I keep passing the same landmark. I think I don't know, stuck. More static. The voice came back, breaking up. Repeat. Can't. Signal. Then the line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the screen. The call had dropped. I tried again. It wouldn't connect. I looked at the road ahead. It was darker now, the last traces of twilight fading into night. My headlights illuminated maybe 50 feet of pavement before the darkness swallowed everything else. I had 2 choices, stay here or keep driving. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. The road stretched out before me, empty and silent. I watched the odometer tick upward. 1 mile, 2 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles. And then I saw the barn again. 4th time. I didn't stop this time. I just kept driving, my jaw clenched, my hands locked on the wheel. I started counting landmarks, a dented mailbox on the right side of the road, a small bridge over a dry creek bed, a section of guardrail that had been patched with newer metal. I passed them all. Then, 10 minutes later, I passed them all again. Same mailbox, same bridge, same guardrail. I was looping. There was no other explanation. I checked the fuel gauge, still 3/4 full. The GPS still showed steady progress south, but the world outside my windows was repeating like a scratched record. I tried the radio, static on every channel. I tried my phone again. No signal now, not even one bar. The darkness was complete now, pressing in from all sides. The only light came from my headlights and the faint glow of my dashboard. I drove for another hour, past the barn 6 more times, past the mailbox, past the bridge, over and over. My mind was racing, trying to find a rational explanation. A glitch in the GPS, a mistake in my own perception, exhaustion, hallucination. But I knew what I was seeing. I knew what was happening. Then I remembered something, a story I'd heard from another driver years ago. He'd talked about a stretch of road in Nevada where drivers sometimes got turned around, lost. Some people called it a dead zone, a place where the normal rules didn't apply. I dismissed it as superstition at the time. Now I wasn't so sure. I decided to try something different. The next time I approached the barn, I slowed to a crawl and turned on my high beams, flooding the structure with light. That's when I saw it. Someone was standing in front of the barn, just standing there, motionless. A figure in dark clothing facing the road. I couldn't make out details, couldn't see a face, just the outline of a person. I stopped the truck completely, maybe 30 feet from the figure. I sat there, engine running, staring through the windshield. The figure didn't move. I flashed my headlights. Once, twice. No response. My heart was hammering. Every instinct told me to drive away, to get as far from this place as possible. But I'd been driving for hours and I was still here. Running hadn't worked. I reached for the door handle, then stopped. What was I thinking? Getting out of the truck would be insane. But staying in this loop was insane too. I opened the door and stepped down onto the pavement. The air was cold now, much colder than it had been earlier. My breath came out in visible clouds. "Hey," I called out. My voice sounded small in the vast darkness. The figure didn't respond. I took a step forward, then another. My legs felt weak, but I kept moving. When I was about 15 feet away, the figure moved. Just a slight turn of the head, as if noticing me for the first time. Then it spoke. "You need to turn around." The voice was flat, emotionless. I couldn't tell if it was male or female. "What?" I said. "Turn around, go back the way you came." "I've been going the same way for hours," I said. "It's not working." "You're going the wrong direction." "I'm heading south, my GPS." "Your GPS is wrong. You're going the wrong direction." I stood there, confused. South is wrong? The figure didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "For you, yes. Tonight, south is wrong." I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. "What are you talking about? Turn around, go north, don't stop until sunrise." Before I could respond, the figure turned and walked toward the barn. Within seconds, it had disappeared into the darkness beyond my headlights. I stood there alone on the empty highway, my mind reeling. Then I got back in the truck, pulled a U-turn, and started driving north. The change was immediate. Within minutes, I passed landmarks I hadn't seen during the loop. A farm with lights on in the windows, a closed gas station, a green highway sign indicating the next town. Different landmarks, new sights. The loop was broken. I drove north through the night, just as the figure had told me. I didn't stop, didn't pull over. I just kept the truck moving, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. When the sun finally rose over the mountains, I pulled into a truck stop near Coeur d'Alene and sat in the parking lot, shaking. I never made the delivery to Boise. I called dispatch and told them I'd had mechanical trouble. They rerouted the load to another driver. I've driven Highway 95 since then, but only during the day, and I never drive south after sunset, because some roads have rules that don't make sense until you break them. I found a truck stop on my GPS that didn't exist, and by the time I realized my mistake, I was already pulling into the parking lot. If this is your first time listening, hit that subscribe button. And if these stories are keeping you company tonight, leave a comment. Are you driving? Lying in bed? Let me know. I'm 37 years old, and I've been using GPS navigation for my entire driving career. I trust the technology. I rely on it. So when my GPS showed a truck stop exactly where I needed one, I didn't question it. I should have. It was late February, and I was hauling frozen goods from Salt Lake City to Denver. The route took me across Wyoming on Interstate 80 through some of the most desolate terrain in the country. Flat plains, wind-scoured hills, miles of nothing. I'd left Salt Lake around 4 in the afternoon, planning to drive straight through. But by 10 at night, I was exhausted. My eyes were burning. My back ached. I needed to stop. I checked my GPS for the nearest truck stop. The screen showed one coming up in 12 miles. I didn't recognize the name, but that wasn't unusual. Small independent stops pop up all the time, and I didn't know every single location in Wyoming. The listing showed it had fuel, food, and parking. Everything I needed. I took the next exit. The off-ramp curved down to a 2-lane road that cut through empty prairie. No lights, no buildings, just darkness and the occasional fence post caught in my headlights. The GPS indicated I should continue straight for another 3 miles. I drove slowly, scanning the horizon for any sign of lights. Truck stops are visible from miles away. The fuel pumps, the parking lot floods, the bright signs advertising diesel prices. But I saw nothing. After 2 miles, I started to feel uneasy. The road was getting narrower. The pavement was cracked and uneven, like it hadn't been maintained in years. The GPS showed I was close, half a mile away. Then I saw it. A cluster of lights in the distance, faint, but there. My relief was immediate. As I got closer, the lights resolved into a truck stop. A single building with a fuel island out front and a large gravel parking lot. A few trucks were parked in the shadows at the far end. The sign above the building read, Waypoint Travel Plaza, in faded letters. Some of the lights were burned out, giving it a flickering, unsteady glow. It looked old, run down, but it was a place to stop, and that's all I cared about. I pulled into the parking lot and circled around, looking for a good spot. The gravel crunched under my tires. The other trucks I'd seen from the road were parked in a neat row, dark and silent. No running lights, no movement. I chose a spot near the building, close enough to see the entrance but far enough from the other trucks to give myself space. I shut off the engine and sat there for a moment, rubbing my eyes. The building was lit from inside, but I couldn't see anyone moving around. No attendant at the fuel desk, no customers walking in or out. Maybe it was just a slow night. I grabbed my wallet and stepped out of the cab. The cold hit me immediately. Wyoming in February is brutal, and the wind cut through my jacket like it wasn't there. I walked toward the entrance. The glass door was smudged and dirty, but I could see inside. Rows of shelves stocked with snacks and drinks, a coffee station along the back wall, a counter near the front with an old-fashioned register, but no one was inside. I pushed the door open. A bell jangled above my head, the sound too loud in the silence. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I stepped inside and let the door close behind me. The air was warm but stale, like the heat had been running for days without any fresh air circulation. I walked to the counter and looked around. There was a small sign taped to the register. Back in 5 minutes. I checked my watch, 10:47 p.m. I decided to wait. I grabbed a cup of coffee from the self-serve station and poured myself a cup. The coffee was hot, at least. I took a sip. It tasted burnt and bitter, but I didn't care. I stood there by the counter, drinking my coffee, waiting for someone to appear. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Still no one. I walked down one of the aisles, looking at the shelves. The products were strange, off-brand snacks I'd never heard of, sodas with generic labels. Everything looked slightly wrong, like a store that had been stocked by someone who'd never actually been in a convenience store before. I picked up a candy bar. The wrapper was faded, the colors dull. I checked the expiration date. I dropped the candy bar like it had burned me. I looked at the other products. All of them had expiration dates from the 90s, some even older. My pulse quickened. I walked back to the front of the store and looked out through the glass door. The parking lot was darker than it had been when I came in. The lights seemed dimmer, and the trucks I'd seen parked at the far end were harder to make out now, just vague shapes in the shadows. I pushed open the door and stepped outside. The cold hit me again, but this time it felt different, heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on me. I walked toward the other trucks, my footsteps loud on the gravel. As I got closer, I realized something was wrong. The trucks were old, not just old, but ancient. Models from decades ago. Their paint was faded and peeling. Their tires were flat, sunk into the gravel, windows cracked or missing entirely. These trucks hadn't been driven in years, maybe longer. I spun around and looked back at the building. The lights were still on, but now they looked different, dimmer, flickering more, like they were struggling to stay lit. I ran back to my truck, my heart hammering in my chest. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors behind me. My hands were shaking as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, then died. I tried again. Same result. Panic flooded through me. I pumped the gas pedal and turned the key again. Nothing. I looked at the dashboard. All the lights were dead. No power, no display, just darkness. I sat there in the silent cab, my breath coming in short gasps. Then I heard it, a sound from outside. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming closer. I looked in the side mirror and saw a figure approaching, someone walking across the gravel toward my truck. The figure stopped a few feet from my door, just standing there. I couldn't see a face, just a silhouette against the dim lights of the building. Then it raised one hand and tapped on my window. 3 times. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The figure stood there for a long moment. Then it turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness beyond the building. I waited, my entire body tense, listening for any sound. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 20. I'd lost track of time. Then, without warning, my dashboard lights flickered back on. The engine turned over smoothly, rumbling to life like nothing had happened. I didn't wait to figure out why. I threw the truck into gear and pulled out of the parking lot, tires spraying gravel as I accelerated. I drove back to the main road and got back on the interstate as fast as I could. I didn't stop again until I reached Cheyenne, nearly 2 hours later. By then, the sun was starting to rise. When I checked my GPS, there was no record of the truck stop, no saved location, no entry in my recent searches. I tried searching for Waypoint Travel Plaza. Nothing came up. I tried looking at the map, zooming in on the area where I'd exited. There was no truck stop marked, just empty land. I called dispatch and asked if they'd ever heard of a truck stop at that location. They hadn't. I filed a report anyway, told them everything. They documented it but didn't take any action. Because what could they do? I had no proof, no photos, just a story. But I know what I saw, I know where I went. And I know I'll never take an exit based solely on GPS again. Because sometimes the places we find aren't meant to be found. And sometimes they don't want to let us leave. Thanks for riding along through these 7 stories. If you made it this far, please hit the like button and leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable on a lonely highway? Share your story, and remember, stay safe out there on the road. I'll see you in the next one.